Are you often told that you're too sensitive? Maybe told to stop thinking about things so much? Or you need a lot of time to recharge after a hectic day? If so, you could be what is known as a highly sensitive person, or HSP. And today I'm going to explain what a highly sensitive person is, share 10 signs that you are an HSP, and offer some tips on how we can manage our vulnerability to being overwhelmed. If you find this type of content helpful and educational, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. It really does help. The term highly sensitive person was coined by psychologist and author Elaine Aron. Now, it is not a diagnosable mental illness, but it's often linked to sensory processing disorders. And according to Aron's theory, HSPs have a stronger response to internal and external stimuli when compared to people who are not HSPs. And this affects roughly 15 to 20% of the population. Being highly sensitive has its benefits, as we are more empathic, understanding, and aware. But, as I'm sure you can realize, it can also have a negative impact, making us feel overwhelmed easily, exhausted, and often needing time alone to recharge. I would also argue that being highly sensitive is a bit trickier now with social media and the ability to be overstimulated at our fingertips. We can easily tap into the pain going on in the world and be shown tons of images, videos, and music anytime we open an app. We can even share something lovely about our life or an issue that we're having, and people online can bully us, judge us for how we look, claim that we don't have a right to be struggling because other things are going on in the world. It can be hard to stay regulated these days, which is why we all need access to affordable healthcare and mental health care. And if you're in the States and you haven't enrolled in an affordable healthcare plan, you can go to healthcare.gov and enroll now. If you find yourself in a crisis or are needing extra support, you can also call the crisis response line at 988. And this video comes to you as part of the Better Internet Initiative supported by the Fellow Americans Education Fund. Let's move into the 10 signs you are a highly sensitive person. Sign number 1, you feel at your best when you're alone and in your own space. Because the world can be so overwhelming and we can easily become overstimulated, we can feel most comfortable when we get to be alone, in our home, doing the things we want to do. Now, this doesn't mean that we need it to be silent and we're going to sit in the dark, but it does mean that we're able to figure out the right mix of things going on around us. We all thrive when we aren't too over or under stimulated. And being alone means that we get to set everything up in a way that's pleasing to us. And we may find ourselves needing this time in between stimulating events. The amount of alone time we need, it'll vary depending on our personal needs and how dysregulated we feel at the time. And I do want to throw out a warning here that isolating all of the time isn't good for any of us. Even if we are HSPs, that doesn't mean we don't make the time to see people or build relationships and connect. We may just not need to do it as often as others. We all need connection with other people. And I don't want this sign to be an excuse that we all use to explain away our depressive symptoms. So keep an eye on this sign if you feel it applies to you all the time. Sign number 2, we avoid scary or hurtful content online. Since we are so empathic, watching a movie where someone might be hurt or seeing someone be pranked online can feel overwhelming to us. We can feel so deeply for that person that we don't want to watch anything bad happen to them, even if it's just part of a movie and it's not even happening in real life. It's almost like our sensitivity makes it difficult for us to disconnect our concern from the reality of the situation. Instead of having to deal with that discomfort, we can just find ourselves avoiding it altogether. This sign is one that I personally feel in my bones. Sean loves scary movies, and I can't even watch a suspenseful portion of a drama. I get too worried about the other person and it just stresses me out, so I usually leave the room or close my eyes for a bit. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it makes me feel more comfortable. Sign number 3, we struggle with overthinking. Because we are so aware of everything going on around us, making decisions and processing our days can take a lot of time. We also think about things on a deeper level, maybe getting caught up in all the ways it could affect others or be interpreted. Due to our intense focus on details, we can find ourselves laying awake at night, running through all of the things that we said, emotional responses we experienced, and what we think others felt. It can feel like there's not enough time in the day to think it all through, and even though we want to sleep, we can't shut our brain off. We can even find ourselves jumping around in time, worrying about tomorrow, but also, trying to work through some past stuff at the same time, feeling compelled to run through all that happened today. It can feel overwhelming and exhausting at times. Sign number 4, we become annoyed and overwhelmed when people try to get us to do too many things at once. Because we process things on a deeper level and often notice minute details that others don't, it can be hard for us to do multiple things at once. Not to mention the fact that we worry about how everything we do affects other people, so we may be a bit perfectionistic in the things that we do. And if we don't feel like we get to focus on the task at hand and only that task, then we can worry that that is going to make the result not as good, and we're going to let other people down. Overall, when we feel pulled in multiple directions, it can cause us to get dysregulated, feel out of control, and we can find ourselves irritable and in our fight-flight response. Sign number 5, we prefer dim lighting. Because HSPs are often connected to sensory processing disorders, being in a loud and bright environment is going to feel immediately overwhelming. Even overhead lighting can just feel like too intense or uncomfortable. And I read some comments from HSPs who said that overhead lighting feels blinding and that they wear special glasses at work to manage this, or take breaks where they sit with their eyes closed for a bit. Even a few of my friends hate bright lights and especially overhead lighting, and they will come into your home and turn on your lamps and turn off the overhead lights. And I have to be honest, I love that they feel comfortable enough to do that because I want them to feel good. And lower lighting, it doesn't bother me at all. Sign number 6, we have an intense fear of rejection. Now, this ties directly into the fact that we feel everything intensely. If someone doesn't like us or we don't get top marks, we can feel like a complete failure. And the intensity of that feeling is so overwhelming to our system that we often feel like we just can't take it. This can cause us to opt out of tough projects, struggle with any kind of feedback, and it can make dating difficult too. We often don't realize how many parts of our life are affected by a fear of rejection, but just consider for a moment how many things that you do every day that could end with someone not liking it or not liking you. There's a lot, right? I can think of a ton. Sign number 7, we are really sensitive to caffeine. I honestly hadn't thought of how caffeine could affect HSPs, but this sign is even in the HSP test that Elaine Aron created. It is on this list because caffeine is a stimulant to our nervous system. And if we're already extra stimulated, it could push us into a dysregulated space easily. When those of us who aren't HSPs are looking to feel more alert, awake, and able to focus, our HSP friends are looking to turn that all down a little bit. So if you know that you already feel on edge, often overwhelmed, or are having a hard time relaxing, caffeine may not be the best thing to put into your body. And trust me, I know it's part of our culture in many ways. I grew up in Washington State and we love our coffee there, but I also know that sometimes too much coffee can make me feel jittery and even mimic the symptoms of anxiety. Sign number 8, we cry easily. This sign probably doesn't come as a shock, but it's important to talk about because too often we're embarrassed of this sign or have been shamed by others for it. So we can find ourselves stuffing our feelings down and not letting ourselves cry even when we feel the need to. Now, I know personally noticing if I feel more emotional than normal is a sign that I'm not doing well and I need to get back into therapy. So whether or not you think you're an HSP, this sign is something that we should all take note of. Notice if you feel like crying when you're watching TV, hearing about something going on in the world, or always feel like you could cry at the drop of a hat. What this means is that our nervous system is already dysregulated. And if we can notice this sooner rather than later, then we can do something about it. Like going home and taking a break from all of the people, lights, and noise. Since no one enjoys crying in public around people we maybe don't know that well, it's best if we start to pay attention to this sensation so that we can do something about it. Sign number 9, we often feel misunderstood. This is a big one, and the reason that most of us HSPs can feel lonely a lot of the time. When we've been told since we were children that we were too much, too sensitive, or being drama queens, it can feel like we aren't lovable as we are. Or that if we do share how we really feel, it won't be heard or understood. And since HSPs make up 15 to 20% of the population, that means that the vast majority of people don't understand what it's like to feel overwhelmed constantly and need downtime to recharge, which is part of the reason why I wanted to create this video, so that we can understand this more and help the HSPs in our life feel more seen and understood. Sign number 10, we feel out of place a lot. This last sign is a doozy and can happen because before we knew that we were highly sensitive, we probably believed that we were just weird or the oddball, never feeling like we fit in anywhere. Our society praises those who can work long hours, do things quickly, and juggle a lot of tasks at once. And when we are highly sensitive, doing that feels completely dysregulating. Therefore, our experience in life can feel very different from others and lead us to feeling out of place all the time. We all know how valuable it is to know that we aren't alone with our struggles. And when we're an HSP, it can feel like we are. If you're anything like me and feel that some of these signs are true for you or you feel them in your bones, then here are some ways that we can better manage them. First up, we have to get to know our biggest triggers. Are we most dysregulated in crowds? Is it when we see someone else being hurt that we get upset? Maybe when we haven't slept well? Start to pay attention to the things that are the most upsetting so that you can decide when to engage with those things, if you engage with them at all. Next, we want to pay attention to the way that we talk to ourselves about our sensitivity. We aren't weak, crybabies, too much, or even shy. Those are probably old stories from our childhood that we keep telling ourselves, almost like someone else started the abuse, but now we're choosing to continue it. So pay attention to the conversation that you have with yourself, and you can use bridge statements to challenge those thoughts. Remember, bridge statements aren't positive, they're just less negative than the original thought. For example, if my automatic thought was, I'm too sensitive and that makes me weak, then the bridge statement could be something like, I am sensitive, but I also hear that being this way isn't always a weakness. I think mine is, but maybe not for everybody. See? Not positive, but not as negative. And you keep building the bridge little by little to be less and less negative. Since we're talking about these old stories from our childhood, it could also be beneficial to do some inner child work. Elaine Aron even mentions this in her book, throughout, how we shouldn't ignore our child selves. And instead, it's important to let them know that we love them just as they are. If you have a tough time with this or need more guidance on how to get started, I have an inner child workshop available on my website right now. So you can just head over to katiemorton.com and access it today. And finally, reframing. This is a tool often used in therapy, and it really just challenges us to see something from a new perspective and with more context. This means that when we want to think or say, I'm just too sensitive, maybe after watching this video, we can reframe that and say, I am a highly sensitive person, and that comes with benefits and costs. Now, I know that this can seem similar to bridge statements, but we can reframe things that aren't actually negative. We use this tool when we notice that our way of thinking or acting isn't getting us where we want to go. Maybe we need to consider it from another perspective or give more context to it. I hope this was helpful. Being sensitive can be such an asset if we can just figure out how to manage it. If you're looking to work on yourself, please check out my website, katiemorton.com, and take a look at all of my workshops on there. They are a great way to get started on your mental health journey today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.